Welcome to 28.5, where we explore a unique and authentic perspective on the women's game, break down upcoming matchups, and discuss the latest news and trends in women's basketball. We are your hosts. I'm Sydney Story, and I played at the University of Tennessee under Pat Summitt.
And I'm Becca Goodman, and I played at the University of Notre Dame under Muffet McGraw. And we're thrilled to have you join us today. Before we jump in, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoy what you hear, be sure to tune in each week and support and share the love. Now let's get started with today's episode. Hey, Sid, how's it going?
Hey there, Beck. It's good to be back after Christmas holiday here.
Yeah, I hope you had a Merry Christmas, and to all of our listeners as well. Hope you guys enjoyed some time with family, friends, and loved ones and getting set up for a nice, happy new year. We have an interesting episode for you all today. We're going to go back to the old school college days where we used to do 2 halves instead of 4 quarters. So we have a first half where we're just going to talk about issued gear, some of the perks that you get being a D1 athlete. I can only imagine how it's been upped even more so now. And then our second half, we're going to go through some predictions on some regular season conference winners. We'll have Sid and myself pick some winners for the ACC, SEC, Big 10, Big 12, and Big East. And then we're going to have a quick little overtime with some in the news. So let's get started.
So back when we played, we were both Adidas schools. You were at Notre Dame. I was at Tennessee. I'm assuming we got similar gear, but just with our school colors. It's very possible. I mean, it's hard to go back all those years and try to line things up, but I would imagine back then a lot of that issued gear was the same for some of those big premier teams. And then, like I said, they would just, give you your school colors. But issued gear was a ton of fun. We didn't have the NIL world back then. We lived for gear day when we knew we were going to get some new gear. Usually at the beginning of the season, when you're starting preseason, you're going to have the issued gear that you're going to wear during all those preseason workouts. So you're going to get shoes and sports bras and spandex and shirts and shorts and all of that good stuff. Book bag for school, things like that were fun to get. And then throughout the season, it was sprinkled in when you would get different gear. And the Christmas time frame was when we would often get new gear. And it was just so much fun to have that fresh look.
Yeah.
At this point, you have all your travel gear heading into the season. And so it's just like nice to get a couple extra things sprinkled in. So I'm curious, Becca, can you think back to some Christmas gear that you got that was fun to get?
I can't remember like specific outfits or items, but around Christmas time is when we always like leveled up our gear and we would bring in more green items. Obviously, as you know, whenever we wear green, it's kind of like we're ready to turn up, turn on, and it's a special time. So in the beginning, it was always very much, the gold and the navy blue. I remember because it's all in your locker. They place it all out. Your managers put it on your chair and have it draped everywhere. And it could be a new bag, new socks, even new shoes. That was always the thing. How many pairs of shoes can you have and just rotate with? But I would say anything that around Christmas time is when we added a lot more of the green. And that was for big games. Conference play was coming up, Tourney itself, so it was nice to have those things around Christmas time, just as like a little pick-me-up for the holidays and like a gift from the school. What about you?
Yeah, so around that time was when we would get more of the sweatshirts and that type stuff, because down in Tennessee, I mean, yeah, we get colder in the falls for sure, but it was like now winter-ish weather is going to be hitting. So we needed to gear up and have some warmer clothes. So I remember getting that a few Christmas seasons. And when I look back at some of the fun gear that we would get, it was a tradition, and I hope this tradition is still going. I would imagine it is, but it was a tradition when you were a Lady Vol that each year you got a certain gift. And this went for all Lady Vols that played all sports. So like my freshman year, it was this director's chair that had the Lady Vol logo on it and your name on the back. And they were like really well done and super cool. I still have mine to this day. Love that thing. One of the years, and I think it's your junior year, you get a Lady Vol varsity jacket, which was like super fun because now you're like an upperclassman and you just like wear it with pride. One year was like a really nice watch. Your senior year, it's a Lady Vol ring. So that was like not necessarily Adidas gear, but it was gear that was issued to all the Lady Vols. And We took pride in those gifts. It meant that you were advancing into another year and getting that item. And that was just like fun across all of us Lady Vol athletes. And I thought that was a really cool touch by the university. Did you guys have anything like that at
We
Notre Dame?
did. And as you're saying it, I'm like, wow, it's almost the same. But we got the Letterman's jacket our first year. Then we got like a nice blanket the second. It was like embroidered. Then it was a watch and then a ring. So,
Okay.
but I will tell you, we didn't get like coats, like Notre Dame issued coats for travel, which I thought was insane. But I don't know if it was something, back in the day, they were super strict about the rules. And it was like track athletes get that because they're outdoor, you're an indoor sport. So we can't give you that same level because you get X, Y. It was a whole thing, but we were always like mad. I was like, we're traveling. We're out here traveling. And we're wearing, our Letterman's jacket or some other coat that we just had. But I was always bummed we didn't get stuff like that. So did you ever want to be like a Nike or a Under Armour school instead?
So I grew up in AAU. As you know, we were
Mm.
Adidas primarily. We went to the Adidas Top 10 All America camp. This is an interesting one because they start grooming you pretty
Yeah.
young to
Yeah.
pick a school that issues that gear. So I felt like I was a little bit groomed to maybe pick an Adidas school. I don't think it was it certainly wasn't the reason why I picked Tennessee, but it was like a more natural fit to me. Honestly, even back then, Nike, I think was then and is certainly is now, I think the top dog. And
Mm-hmm.
not trying to knock Candace Parker. I'm hoping that she can turn that around now being with the Adidas family and on the business side of things. I hope she can bring more to Adidas women's basketball specifically, but Nike was just always cool. Like I thought it would be
Yeah.
cool to be able to wear Air Force Ones as travel gear,
Yeah.
wear Nike shoes on the court. I just thought that they were maybe a next step up. So what about you? Did you think differently or?
So I don't think I thought about it at all, like at all. And then being there is when I kind of was like, oh, it's Adidas. Like it wasn't something I looked at. I do know kids nowadays that is something that is one of the top items that they check off on their list for recruiting purposes. For me, it was never about the brand, but I did always want Nike. And I think it was because they had different color palettes that they used. They brought in different styles. And I understand, like, we'd go to the Big East tournament, right? And you can only have so many Adidas stripes. Like, the 3 stripes were an issue for compliance because we were over representing a brand. So we would get specific gear that didn't have the Adidas logo or the 3 stripes visible. And that was what we were supposed to wear to the Big East conference so that they weren't overrepresented by many other schools, which I just thought was crazy. Like it's just gear. It's just our shoes are Adidas. It is what it is. Like, aren't we supposed to wear that? But they were pretty hardcore about it. But the difference between Nike and Adidas, I holistically think was just the color options.
Yeah. Yep. I'm with you. And the amount of shoes that we would get was kind of insane. And I was one of those players where I would want to break my shoes in, wear them for a while, not wear a new pair of shoes every game.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly that seems crazy. But the year we won the national championship, I remember I went back to my locker and I'm like, I feel like I just need to start counting these boxes. My locker was full of them. I had 17 pairs of shoes in my locker that I had not even worn that year, which just seems crazy. And it's probably worse
It's
now. I mean,
nuts.
now
Yeah.
you've got Paige Beckers who has her own shoe, and so the team gets that
The
shoe.
whole team
and then
gets it. Yeah.
the last game when they just played USC, they all had the everyone watches women's sports shoes on from Nike.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even imagine how many pairs of shoes they have now. But even back then, I thought it was kind of crazy. So I don't know. How did you feel that way about shoes?
Yeah, and the weird part is once I got in a shoe, I didn't I didn't want any of the other styles. Like I ended up giving some shoes to my cousins after the fact that I knew I wouldn't need. We'd be getting new ones and it was like I'm never ever going to wear these because I liked, you get 5 to 7 preseason, you get another load again in the middle and then at the end then you have, your summer workout, your walk around shoes, stuff like that. So you're constantly getting reloaded, but I always stuck to one style of shoe. And the interesting part is different players at Notre Dame would get different styled shoes. So like the post players would get like a bigger, thicker, heavier shoe where like our guards and point guards would get a different one. And I was always like, why can't I have that shoe? And they're like, well, it's a bit lighter. And I'm like, yeah, let me have that one. Like I was never one for those big, like gaudy, chunky shoes where supposedly there was a rhyme or reason that it helped you as a post player. Like I did you ever hear that? Did Tennessee ever have stuff like that? I never saw if it benefited one way or the other than it's a big ass shoe. Like,
Yeah, no, I never heard of that, or I don't think we had that. But back then, I'm not even surprised that was probably a thing they talked about. So that's an interesting one for sure. All right, so our second half here is going to be all around the regular season conference and who we think is going to win in the Power Four plus the Big East conferences. So this one, I'm excited about it because if you look at a couple of these conferences, they are loaded. This is not necessarily an easy pick. I think it's easy to go, well, this is where teams are ranked right now. And like for the ACC, we're going to go Notre Dame, South Carolina, Big East, UConn. Like some of them, those teams very well might win these conferences. But within the SEC and the Big Ten specifically, it could be a handful of teams, which I think is fun. We don't always see that every year. So we're going to highlight and go through the ACC, the SEC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, and as I mentioned, the Big East. So let's start with the ACC, and I'm curious who you think is going to win the regular season this year.
I am riding heavily, loyal, always and forever with Notre Dame. We've been short on numbers early on in the season, even up until this point. We just had a game and we had a couple other people out. So excited to get us fully reloaded, get our post players back, have Maddie Wesbeld join us and kind of see where we go from there. But I'm rocking with the Irish. What about you?
I think it's a no-brainer. I think Notre Dame's going to walk away with this one. You have some of the teams here like Louisville. You've got Jeff Walls, who's been around the game. He's capable of beating a lot of teams in this conference, but I think he's going to fall short against Notre Dame and maybe even Duke this year. If Duke is playing Duke basketball, they're capable of being at the top end of this conference, but I don't think any of them stack up to Notre Dame. If Notre Dame's rolling, if Notre Dame's not playing like they played in the Cayman Islands, let's hope that's like out of their system.
Let's not bring that up.
And they can hit the road here and win a lot of these games. NC State has been a little rough so far, and they've played a very tough schedule though. So that maybe is making them a little bit better heading into this if they were able to learn and get better from some of those losses. But I don't see them stacking up to Notre Dame. I think Miami has all of the hype on social media, and they've got some players that do their thing down there, and they're pretty good and have a good coach. But I still don't think they stack up to Notre Dame. Florida State has the number one score in the country right now. We've highlighted them. They score 90 plus points a game. They bring a lot on the offensive side, but I still think Notre Dame locks that team down. They're not a top caliber team like Notre Dame is. And as you and I know, conference play is such a grind, and you have to bring it day in and day out. And I think Notre Dame, if they can stay healthy, this is for all these teams, right?
Yeah.
Walks away with this one.
You mentioned a lot of teams that, we keep an eye on and we're mentioning. I'm also just excited to see how Georgia Tech holds everybody off. I think they're going to be a good competitor for this as well. And then Stanford. Yeah, we've mentioned what they can do and where they can be and what we expect of them. And that's just the standard Stanford way. It's not going to be without a fight. As you've seen from our last episode, upsets happen, especially if you're not on your P's and Q's at all times, honestly, all times. And I think a lot of times the NIL and the fact that if girls show out in one game, they can make money now. Like you can get a deal for it. You can get a sponsor. So I think it's more important now than ever, and it ever has been, to play your style of game and take every game day by day and one at a time.
And I think what's interesting about the ACC is in different years, it's probably a really strong conference because of those teams. Duke, Louisville, NC State, Stanford,
UNC.
We can throw Georgia Tech in there now. I think they might be here to stay if they continue to play at the caliber they're playing. Virginia Tech, if Megan Duffy can get things rolling. Like the ACC is no slouch of a conference, I think, in most years. I just think Notre Dame is of that next level. And the conference is going to beat itself up a little bit underneath them, but I just think Notre Dame is able to to win this conference. We'll see. It'll be interesting.
Yep. Completely agree. Jump into our second conference. Let's go to the SEC, Sid. Who do you got for that?
Yeah, the SEC for me, and this is where picks maybe get a little bit boring. I'm going South Carolina. What about you?
I have the same. And I know we're going to talk about other ones, but I have at least like 2 or 3 that I could add to that plate. But as you mentioned, South Carolina, they're the staple right now in women's basketball. So South Carolina it is.
What Dawn has done the past few years here is you kind of have to put them up there because there's teams, LSU, they haven't been tested yet this year. They haven't really played anybody, don't know how they really stack up. So it's interesting. And the SEC has morphed a little bit, certainly since I played. When I played, Missouri wasn't a part of the conference. Texas A&M was not part of the conference. And now we have Oklahoma and Texas that have also joined. And those are 2 high caliber teams. Oklahoma's playing really well right now. They average 26 assists a game. They bring in on the defensive end. Texas is a top 5, potentially a Final Four team. We saw them take Notre Dame to the wire in overtime and lose on the road, but a really, really good team. I think there are some good teams in this conference. We've talked about Kentucky a lot. We've talked about the Lady Vols a lot. Again, Lady Vols, a team that haven't really played anybody. So it's hard to know how they stack up, and they're playing a different style ball. But South Carolina, I think with what Dawn brings and the experience of her team and the depth of her team, when you look at a body of work and how long and grueling a conference season really is, I think South Carolina squeaks by over Texas, squeaks by over LSU potentially. Those 3 to me are probably on the next level within the conference who could potentially win it, but we'll see. You just never know here on some of these teams that might start peaking a little bit later in the season here.
Yeah. I agree 1,000% with you about Texas. Oklahoma, I think once they play South Carolina and Tennessee, I think that will be a rude awakening, just the style of play and athleticism and tempo. It's a lot different. I'm not saying they can't do it, not saying it won't be a competitive game. It's going to be an adjustment. LSU, definitely interested to see how they stack up against these juggernauts. These teams have played the top 5 continuously. Texas had a couple games already. South Carolina's had a couple games already. So having those early on in the season, I think is huge. So LSU, without it being the Angel Reese, Haley Van Lith show, yes, they still have names. It's just going to be interesting to see once conference play comes, the grind, how Flage, Morrow stack up. They have the freshman that comes in off the bench and can put up 30. So it'll just be interesting to see their consistency and gameplay against some of these better teams.
Yeah, the 2 wild cards for me in this conference heading into conference play, Kentucky, not sure exactly how they stack up down the stretch. There's been moments when I've been impressed with Kentucky and then moments where I'm thinking to myself, ooh, maybe not of the caliber of some of these teams they're going to have to play. Mm-hmm. Ole Miss is also a wild card to me because we root for Coach Yo. We love what she brings. And Ole Miss can bring some defensive pressure and lock teams down. So do they have a couple upsets? Maybe. It'd be kind of fun for the conference. So I think within the SEC and the Big Ten, there are a lot of teams within that conference that you've got to prepare for and you cannot sleep on because they're capable of really knocking off anybody, which is the interesting piece, I think, in those 2 conferences this year. Not knocking the ACC. There's a lot of great athletes, good coaches in the ACC also, but the SEC and the Big Ten, there are a ton of good teams, which is great for those conferences.
Yeah. Let's jump over to the Big Ten. Let's try to dissect some of this. They've added quite a bit of schools. I have to highlight the UCLA, USC ad. Illinois and Indiana have been on the cusp a bit. Indiana, great program, kind of been on the ropes here and there. Not really sure what team will show up for them. Same thing with Iowa. Jan Jensen's there trying to get back in the flow of things. Great team, still has a good core group that they can build around. Maryland, as you have mentioned, is kind of your wild card. They're in the top 10. I think once we see some of these matchups with USC, UCLA, I think we'll get a pulse of where these teams really lie. Michigan State, same thing. Big name players, great programs, solid foundation. Minnesota, we haven't really talked a lot about. Same thing with Northwestern, Oregon, Penn State, and we mentioned before Rutgers as well. Interested to see them and get a bit more of their games. Nebraska being in the top 25 for the first time in a while. Great to see them in it. Again, it's just gonna. I honestly think, and I'm gonna highlight, right. Purdue's had a rough year. They're kind of rebuilding. Washington and Wisconsin, we haven't chatted a lot about either. But UCLA and USC, they are the bar. Anybody who plays them, you can beat, compete, or come close. I think that brings you into a bigger discussion. What do you think, Sid?
Yeah. For the Big Ten, they totally inherited those two teams overnight. It's
Yeah.
like so interesting to think about. And I don't even like for my pick on this one. Oh man, it comes down to UCLA and USC, and I
Mm-hmm.
almost lean towards USC because of how they showed out against UConn the other night. UCLA's got to stay healthy. Like Kiki Rice has to stay healthy throughout the
Yep.
rest of the season. That's been a kind of a wild card for them. She's playing right now and she's playing really well. I think I'm going USC on my pick for the Big Ten.
Okay. And the not so great part is we really won't see these two teams play until the day before Valentine's Day. So they'll have a lot of fine tuning before they have that big conference matchup. I'm going to go with UCLA. I don't know if you would have thought I would have picked that one. Just the fact that they're the number 1 seed right now and they're kind of rolling. Rice has been out and they've still been able to beat top tier teams now with Lauren Betts out and them still having a nice win. I think they're demanding a bit more from their team as a whole. So I'm just excited to see how they finish out the conference.
Yeah, it was tough for me not to pick Maryland, right? Like I'm picking them in the Final Four, but this is different. It
Yeah.
totally is. Like
Yep.
for me, what I know Brenda Fries can bring to that NCAA tournament versus the grind of that conference play and a ton of games they're going to have to go through. I think USC weathers that storm, even though it's going to be them traveling across the country a ton. Like that's going to weigh, I think, on some of these players. That's kind of unknown because we're just heading into it for the first time in basketball. UCLA and USC, two teams that we picked that are going to really have to bear the brunt of all that cross-country travel across conference here. Michigan State, undefeated right now. Do I think they're of the caliber of those two or even a Maryland? I don't, but it'll be interesting to watch and see how they try to put a game plan together and compete. Ohio State's another one that's kind of like Michigan State to me a little bit. I think they're a little bit better than Michigan State. They're ranked higher than them right now. Easy to say that, but I do think Ohio State's a little bit better. Michigan, if they can get Silas Swords and Olsen on their side, Olivia Olsen playing well, that's a lot because they're two freshmen.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Big Ten solid. Iowa's
Yep.
capable of knocking a lot of these teams off. Can't knock Iowa out. Illinois is capable of it. Like there's a lot of good teams.
Yeah, for sure. The Big Ten will be a good one to watch. Absolutely. Heading over to the Big 12, I will confidently and adamantly say there are not a lot of teams here that I am familiar with. And I just think the games haven't been on. Maybe when conference play gets on, maybe they'll be televised. So excited to watch them. Two that stand out to me, Kansas State being ranked. They just played Cincinnati, held their own there, took care of business. But you can't talk about the Big 12 without talking about TCU. Right? That's my pick. Haley Van Lith's there, Sedona Prince. They have 6 transfers, veteran players, off to the best program start for TCU in 30 years, handling business and taking names. But it will be interesting to see how they fare just as conference goes and the grind. And again, staying healthy. That's the number one thing we've said about a lot of these teams. And Haley Van Lith and Sedona Prince, they play a lot of minutes, a ton of minutes. So it'll be interesting without a doubt. Iowa State's in there as well. So yeah, Audie Crooks, Addie Brown, your assist queen, Emily Ryan. But again, I think I think it'll come down to Iowa State, TCU, but I just think TCU is a bit more of a veteran team and can hold their own.
I agree. I think the teams that you've mentioned, the top 3 there being TCU, Iowa State, and then probably Kansas State. Everyone else, there's a reason why we don't hear a ton about them. I think Baylor's still playing good basketball. You don't hear a ton about Baylor anymore since Kim Mulkey left. Like she was a big piece of that program, I think. And to me, good teams. They're a Power 4 conference. They've got great athletes here, but there's not one on this list that I'm like, ooh, they're going to make the Final Four this year. Could happen. Not knocking it. I'm also going to go TCU, I think. Haley Van Lith being her last year, Prince being her last year. I think they're really going to try to go for it.
Definitely. Let's head over to the Big East, my old stomping grounds. When I was there, we didn't have Xavier, Butler, and Creighton in the mix, but it didn't mean it wasn't equally as intense, grimy. I mean, I felt like every game was a fight, like a personal fight, whether it was the fans were really intense, or just the style of play. It was gritty. It was in your face. It was scouting a report to the period of each page, line them up, and just go to work. So Marquette was always a hard gym to play at. Georgetown, I mentioned previously, they're always seem to be ready to go. DePaul, the style of play that they go, run and gun, tons of threes. Always love to see what Doug Bruno puts on the court and just his style. Absolutely huge Doug Bruno fan. And it absolutely was one of my top picks when I was going through the recruiting process. So it'll be good to see this. Again, I just haven't been able to tune into a ton of these games as they've been kicking off or been started. A lot of these teams aren't in the top 25 as of now. I am going with Gino, Paige, and Sarah Strong and the UConn Huskies for the Big East.
I got UConn also. Nobody's going to be able to stop them, even come close. I mean, there's maybe an upset in there, maybe, but Paige Becker's final year, she's rolling through on this one. And the Big East is an interesting conference. A lot of Catholic schools in here, a lot of basketball specific schools in here that you don't really see football programs with. It's fun to see UConn back in the Big East. I think that's kind of cool too, but they're going to run away, I think. I'm not sure how good Villanova is now that Lucy Olson left.
Yeah.
It seems like that's a big loss for them. Marquette has a new coach. Yeah, it's an interesting conference, I think.
I'd like to see some of, and I'm by no means this is going to happen, but wouldn't it be interesting to pick some of those top tier schools from the ACC, SEC, and Big 12 and sprinkle them in, right? The Big East it's a smaller conference as is, just to get a little bit more competition over there. I think it would help the Big East out a lot.
Yeah, like when you were a part of it, when Notre Dame was there it is.
Yeah, well, we moved. I don't know. I wasn't a part of it, but yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, it dismantled, right? The Big East pretty much fell apart. It was crazy, I thought. Like that was such a good basketball conference because there was the staples of Rutgers and Notre Dame and UConn. I mean, back then it was, and there was, other teams that were good too. Villanova was usually pretty good. I mean, you know them better than I do. Yep. So that was crazy in the women's basketball world. And that
we would play UConn 4 times a year.
Oh God, that's
2 in season, 1 in the Big East tournament. And then we would always seem to match up with them for the tournament. It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy.
That's crazy. Okay, let's head into our overtime and in the news. And we just have one thing that we wanted to highlight. We seem to try to highlight the NIL world and the evolution of athletes getting paid. It's just in the news a lot right now. It's evolving a lot right now. The one we wanted to talk about today is around some of that, right? Getting paid to play, pay for play, right? This is what it's about. So the Players Era NIL Tourney is now adding women's basketball in 2025. The men's version of it last year in Vegas. This year, as I mentioned, for 2025, women are going to be a part of this, and they have a chance to earn some big money for playing in this tournament. So now not only can you do your NIL deals with endorsements and make money that way, now you can get paid for playing in these one-off round robin style tournaments like the Players Era Festival. So the Players Era Festival will offer some of the top teams in women's basketball a chance to come to Vegas, play games, and earn $1 million each for each of these teams in NIL money. So let's stop and talk about this for a second. You've got 10 to 12 players on some of these good rosters, and each team is going to get paid $1 million that they can divvy out to their players for playing in the Players Era Festival in Vegas.
That's insane. That is absolutely insane. It's insane, but with allowing NIL, you had to know it would get to this degree, and then I can only imagine what the next page is going to be in this book, right? $1 million split amongst a team of 10. It's pretty nice. That's a pretty nice $100,000. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
What did you say was some of the specifics of it?
So I'll read through some of the article, and there's several articles out there about it. It just got announced not too long ago. So in 2025, the Players Era Festival will put on a 4-team women's round robin tournament featuring number 1 at this point, UCLA, number 3 at this point, South Carolina, number 6, Texas, and number 9, well, we know there's been some losses since then, Duke. So we've got UCLA, South Carolina, Texas, and Duke, the 4 teams on the women's side that are going to play in this. In addition to competing against some of the best teams on the court, like this is already a great tournament for teams to go play in because they're going to get the hype playing against other good teams. Each team will receive that $1 million in guaranteed NIL opportunities off of it. So Really kind of cool. The women's tournament will be held Thanksgiving weekend alongside the men's tourney at the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas, which the Players Era has secured a 5-year deal with that arena. So this is going to be an ongoing thing. And I think it's so awesome. And Dawn was getting her team in there. She's all about this. And I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're a top player in the country right now and you're looking at these teams that are getting in these tournaments where they're going to start paying out money, that's where you want to go. It's a no-brainer to me. Like, I think this only evolves. I think we're going to see more of this. And it's not a shock that Las Vegas is starting it, right? 9 teams that played in the men's tournament last year, and they're expanding that next year. So that this brought in even more money. And it's something that Vegas is going to really start continuing to do. So really cool. If we talk about Dawn specifically, it says right in the article that I'm looking at here that South Carolina head women's basketball coach Dawn Staley echoed that sentiment around what this means for the game, noting that the festival brings together everything we're looking for: quality games early in the season, a great location for fans to come and enjoy the games, and then the NIL opportunities for our players. This is huge. I think it's a game changer, and I'm not surprised that some of this is happening now that the floodgates have been opened and there aren't really NCAA rules around this. Like, why not try to bring in the top teams in the country, secure some of these media rights deals for whoever's going to televise it, because that brings in a ton of money, secure whatever sponsorships that want to be a part of this from an ad revenue, all of that good stuff, and actually pay the players for playing the game. Kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely insane. I couldn't imagine. This is just nuts for any school. What a great opportunity. Always glad to see when it happens on the men's side. It transitions over to the women's side as well. Just as you're talking about this, it's going to be hard for this tourney to not always have the top 5 teams, right? So it doesn't really give a lot of the other schools an opportunity to come in. If you are this tournament, right, aren't you looking at, I want to have the top 4? It's almost like a prequel to what could be the Final Four early on. And it's also taking some revenue from a lot of those Thanksgiving break tournaments that people go on, right? Virgin Islands, Cayman Islands, where a lot of locals there love having that type of tourism come in for big time tournaments. And it might just take away those big schools from there, but maybe it brings in other ones as well. I'm by no means saying it's one or the other. It's just going to be a shift. And I think it's absolutely insane that these girls who are on these teams who get to play in this tournament will make this amount of money. I'm jealous. I'm so jealous. Sid, we were in the wrong year. We should have been, a couple decades later. But what a great opportunity for women's basketball. And this is obviously one of, I think, many things that will only continue to come this way.
Yeah, what an awesome opportunity also. And like I said, you're a recruit right now, and you're looking at what teams are going to be playing in these style tournaments, and you're just going to get that guaranteed money for showing up and playing the game anyways.
Yeah. Get your money, get some good wins, play college ball, and get an education. That's going to be the motto going forward.
Living the dream. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. And with that, I think we'll wrap up our 15th episode. Again, hope everyone had a great holiday with family. In this episode, we talked about we went to halves. Our first half, we talked about Christmas gear and just kind of how the flow of that goes while you're in school, what you get. Second half, we did our regular season conference winners, picked the Power Four in the Big East. And then we did some amazing in the news talking about how these big time schools can get in a tournament and make extra money. So another episode under the belt. Let's head into 2025 with some more good stuff.
All right. Don't forget to follow us and download those episodes. We'll talk to you soon, Beck.
See you, Sid. That's the 28.5 final buzzer for today's episode. Don't forget to hit follow on your preferred podcast platforms to catch every play-by-play. New episodes drop each week throughout the season.
If you've enjoyed our courtside chat, drop us a review or follow us on our social media accounts. And remember, from females who have played the game, the size of the ball matters.